Nat Glover was elected the first black sheriff in Jacksonville, Florida in 1995. He was the first black sheriff in Florida in over 100 years post-Reconstruction. He also served as the president of Edward Waters College, which was in the news recently because of that scumbag, as Ron DeSantis called him, that white supremacist who murdered those people. He started at Edward Waters College before moving over to the dollar store. He was shooed out off the college campus,
Thank God
thankfully.
that security guard did not let him in and could sense that something was wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
He should be getting an award.
Nat Glover also ran for mayor of Jacksonville a few years back. He's got a new book, Striving for Justice, A Black Sheriff in the Deep South. Pleased to be joined by Nat Glover. Nat, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm proud to be here, Dan.
So tell us a little bit about tell us a little bit about your law enforcement career. I mean, it's a long one, and you also then obviously went into education, as we just mentioned, and just sort of how that's evolved and Florida has evolved over the course of your professional career.
Yeah, Dan, Amy, I had some challenges as if you look at my biography. First, I was a young man that's coming out of what we would used to call the ghettos of Jacksonville, and was able to overcome just some would call insurmountable challenges, but was able to make certain that I made an impact. A couple of things that happened to me is, number one, I got retained in the first grade. I had to overcome that. I had to overcome the fact that I was arrested by a couple of detectives who actually stopped me one night, had two napkins, that's the cloth that you wrap the silver up in a restaurant, in my back pocket. I was working at this cafeteria. We used them for handkerchiefs. They put me in jail and got caught downtown in Jacksonville, Florida, doing Axe Handle Saturday. That's when Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists surrounded me, hit me with axe handles, and could have killed me that day, which would have been a contemporary lynching, but I overcame that, and but all along the way, I was able to overcome all of those things with the help of people, black and white, and become a detective, which I always wanted to be, and then moved up the ranks in the sheriff's office and was eventually elected sheriff. So it's just one of those situations that I think was worthy to tell a story, the challenges, and overcoming, with faith and a lot of help from a lot of people, was able to eventually be elected into the Law Enforcement Hall of Fame in Florida.
Congratulations on that. So after you were wrongly arrested and accused of a crime you didn't commit, why did you want to become a police officer and join them? Did you want to try and change the culture?
Yeah, Amy, that's an excellent question. I always wanted to become a police officer, and when I got arrested, and I thought it was somewhat unjust. I mean, then it just reinforced my desire to become a police officer. I mean, it did not discourage me; it encouraged me more.
And then, just thinking about law enforcement at the end of your career, and then you move from law enforcement to politics and to education, and you obviously you bore witness, as we all did, to what's transpired over the last several years with the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of the antipathy towards law enforcement. So where do you think we are now? I mean, I know where we were in 1960 when you were being beaten by white supremacists. We all know that. We know your career and the trajectory of it. But what about now? What are your reflections on where we're at today with respect to law enforcement, particularly in major and mid-major cities like Jacksonville?
Well, then I talk about that in the book, and I think we are in a period in law enforcement, and I'm not just talking about law enforcement. I'm talking about in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
The system itself is a system that, when you look at the disproportionate number of people in our correction system and the proportion of those people in our country, you will see it's it's off. I mean, really bad. Now, we're in a period in law enforcement that's under scrutiny now, and that's the reason for that happened to be because this is not something that had not been happening all along. The things that you've seen, the George Floyd incident and other incidents, the reason that so much emphasis is on it now is because of social media and everybody walking around with a camera in their hand and their cell phone. So, uh, we had other challenges in the law enforcement community when the Supreme Court passed the requirement that you had to advise a suspect of their rights and let them know that they had a right to an attorney. Many police officers thought we would never get a confession again from a suspect, but it actually made law enforcement better. And when we get through this period, I mean, there are some challenges. There's a lack of trust, and in some instances, it's because of the conduct of law enforcement officers. So, in my Striving for Justice book, I talk about that. Law enforcement leadership is going to have to step up and purge themselves of the bad actors, because most law enforcement officers in this country will step out and take a bullet for citizens. So we got to make certain that we don't let those I'm going to say bad actors present the image to the community that's not indicative of what we do as a profession. So, yeah, we got some work to do, but when we get through this period in history, we will be better.
What was your reaction when the NAACP issued a travel advisory this spring to Black Americans to use "quote unquote" extreme care if traveling to Florida?
Well, it's one of those things. It's kind of a tone in Florida now that a number of people feel like it's pretty much anti-black, and there's been some rulings as it relates to Black history and some decisions that they've made in the minorities communities in general. So it's pretty much in the African American community is a toxic environment. So that's another thing. We will have to get through this, and I know we will, and we move on.
You
This
think
is
you think?
not
I'm sorry to
this is
interrupt.
not unusual. We sometimes we take two steps forward and one step back, but we keep pushing forward, and eventually we'll overcome.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, how many? There's something on the order of north of 3 million Black Americans who live in Florida. So they're there by choice. It must be some reason. Most of them are there, and more are coming. Just like more Americans generally are gravitating towards places like Florida. So I mean, do you think like Ron DeSantis is creating an environment that's hostile to blacks? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think our governor is trying to peel, like I'm going to say, most of the uh, presidential candidates on the Republican side. They're trying to appease to the base of Donald Trump, and in that um, process, they are doing some things and saying some things. That may not even be, consistent with their principles and all. But in Jacksonville and the state of Florida in general, the whole notion of um, prohibiting Black history in some environments, it's just to me blatantly racist. I mean, how can you make certain you don't make the future same mistakes made if you don't teach history? And I think it's an undermining and certainly not consistent with the integrity of the education process to abridge that or eliminate that from the curriculums in our schools.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, is that happening? I've read the curriculum. It's been posted online. Charlie Cook posted, other people have posted it. The entire thing, 80 plus pages of it. It's pretty detailed, pretty substantial, pretty comprehensive, and all the allegations about somehow you're not allowed to teach about slavery or Jim Crow or the nation's founding or the treatment of blacks, the civil rights movement, all of those things that are sort of seminal watershed periods, good and bad, in this country's history are included. So that seems to me that's a talking point of Democrats and the president and the vice president. But I mean, the curriculum should speak for itself. Have you read it?
Oh yeah, I've looked at it, and
not to mention it was largely authored by a well-respected black historian at Michigan State. So I'm a little confused by that statement.
Well, I'm somewhat confused myself, to be honest with you. But I do believe that we have had challenges in our history as we move forward as a people, and I'm talking African Americans move forward as a people. We've had those challenges. I mean, we just had a big challenge in affirmative action, Supreme Court ruling affirmative action. And we got to just keep pushing forward and moving forward and go back to cliche, we will overcome. But we are advancing here in this country, and we will continue to advance. And I think that we are the envy of the world as it relates to a democracy, and to some degree, I think we're losing a little bit of that. But I think we will prevail, sure.
He is Nat Glover. In 1995, he was elected as the first black sheriff in Jacksonville, Florida, and the first black sheriff in Florida in more than 100 years post-Reconstruction. His book, autobiography, effectively, Striving for Justice, A Black Sheriff in the Deep South. Nat Glover, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Dan. And just for the record, the proceeds from the book will go to a college scholarship fund for poor kids to access higher education.
Okay, very
That's
good. I'm
wonderful.
glad you mentioned that.
Yep.
All right, very good.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When you're serious about your concealed carry training and education and are ready to learn from an active police officer with a teaching degree, check out Illinois Concealed Carry Training in Midlothian. You'll learn safe, responsible firearm use, home defense planning, conflict avoidance, situational awareness, and how to remain physically, morally, and financially safe in the event you must use your firearm in self-defense or the defense of another. Weekday and weekend classes available.